Alright, in this video we're going to look at graphing exponential functions. An exponential function has the form y equals a times b to the x, and the key is that the x is in the exponent. We'll also kind of look at some different problems that are in general form like this, where the a and the h and the k will move the shape of the graph. So let's start out looking at our first graph here. Let's look at y equals x to the x. Okay, and basically just thinking through the different x values. If x is 0, we have 2 to the 0. Remember, anything to the 0 power is 1. 2 to the first power is 2. 2 to the squared is 4. And 2 cubed is 8. Okay, and so we find these points. When x is 0, we get 1. X is 1, we get a y value of 2. X is 2, y is 4. This, by the way, we need to label our axis. This is 10. This is 10 out here. All right, and x is 4, y is 16 all the way up here. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 up here. Okay, now if we look at when x is negative over here, then we have 2 to the negative 1. Well, that's 1/2. 2 to the negative 2 is 1/4. Okay, and so the larger we get here, it's never going to get down to 0. It's just going to get real close. So negative 1 gives us 1/2, right about a little higher than that. And we get real close. And this is an asymptote here. Never quite going to touch that axis there. And so we'll draw it about. Let's get this close as we can. Let's try that again. Okay, there we go. So graphing by hand is not perfect, but we should be able to picture this idea. All right. So now with that, if we take this 1/4, and we have this second one here, we'll do this one in green. So this 1/4 here, well, that will just take all these y values and drop them down by 1/4. Okay. So over here we have a y value of 1, so we're going to cut that in 1/4, and that's going to be a 1/4 down here. Here we have a y value of 2, but we're going to multiply it by 1/4. 2 times 1/4 is 1/2. Then we have 4 times 1/4 is 1. Then this guy all the way up here is 16. 16 times 1/4 is going to be 4. Okay, and we could even get one more here. 4 to the 2 to the 4th power. Let's go ahead and work this one out. 1/4 times 2 to the 4th power. Well, 2 to the 4th power is, I'm sorry, let's actually do 5th power. That's 5 over there. So 2 to the 5th power is 32, and 1/4 of 32 is 8. Okay, so when we're over here at 5, we're going to be up at 8. So that 1/4 is going to make it go up a lot shallower. Still going to have an asymptote of the x-axis of 0 here. It's going to look something like that. Okay? All right. Now, if we take, let's get a different color here. Let's go red. If we take this one here, if we subtract 1 after doing the exponent, well, that's just going to drop everything. So all of these points from this 1/4 to the x, they're all going to drop by 1. So let's take each of these points and just take them down 1. 4 goes to 3, 8 goes to 7. This 1/4 goes down to, it'd be negative 3/4. And now our asymptote here is going to be this line at negative 1. And we might, let's go ahead and mark that as an asymptote. Something like this. Get a different color. Okay. So we have a new asymptote, which we can label with a dotted line. And now we can graph our graph. Okay. Something about like that. Okay. Now last but not least, if we take this one right here and we have x minus 2, well, that's going to take every x value and it's going to subtract 2 first. So 2 is going to act like 0 would. 10 is going to act like 8 would, so on and so forth. So that's going to move, as we've seen in other situations, that's going to move the graph to the left. Even though it seems like it should go right, we're going left. So let's do that in this purple one here. Oops. Okay. All right, so let's graph this. So it's going to take this graph. So starting with our 1/4 2 to the x, we're going to move it to the right 2. And so that'll give us right 2. We're moving the green one right 2. So if it helps in this kind of case, it's not a bad idea to, got a lot going on here. Still going to have an asymptote of the x-axis. So there we have it. All right, so there's some basic graphs there. Now to look at the flip side of things, let's say, what if we have a fraction in the base? So we have a 1/2 to the x. Well, we got 1/2 to the 1 is obviously a half. And 1/2 squared, well, that's going to become a fourth, and that's going to shrink. If we do 1/2 to the negative, well, let's go 0 first of all, that's 1. If we do 1/2 to the negative 1, well, that's just 2 to the positive 1, which is 2. And 1/2 to the negative 2, well, that's just 2 squared, which is 4. And so we see that it's just flipped around the y-axis here. Okay, so we have 10 out here and going by ones. Okay, so we're going to have the same thing going backwards. When x is 0, y is 1, and it's going to shrink now, a half, a fourth, an eighth. And then when we go to the left over here, when x is negative 1, we've got 2. When x is negative 2, we've got 4. Negative 3, we've got 8. And negative 4, over at negative 4, we have 16. So we go negative 4 and up 16. That should put us right up about 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Right up about here. All right? And there's our points. And the x-axis here is an asymptote. So it gets closer and closer. And see if I can follow these dots about like that. Okay. Then the same transformations apply here. So we've got this red graph we did here, and now let's get rid of that. So now, what if we add 2? Well, that's just going to move everything up. So this is going to take the same points and move them up 2. Okay, and so let's take all of these and they go up 2. And these guys will all go, now it takes our asymptote up 2. So let's, okay, so the asymptote, which was the x-axis, is going to go up 2. And now let's plot our points. So this 1 goes up 2, this 2 is going to go up to 4, and 4 is going to go up to 6, 8 is going to go up to 10, and our graph looks like this. It'll always stay just a little bit to the right of that graph. Even though it looks like it's close up here, it's really moved up 2. Okay? And last but not least, this graph here of 2 to the negative x. Well, is this exponential? It actually is, because this is the same as 2 to the negative 1 to the x power, because we have our power rules where we multiply the powers. And, well, that's just 2 to the negative 1 is 1/2 to the x. And this turns out to be the same graph. So these two graphs are exactly the same. This graph and this one are exactly the same, so we don't need to regraph it. But just realize if we have a negative exponent, it's just going to give us that inverted there. So we've talked about these forms here where we have some base to the x power, and we talked about if we have this a value up here in the h spot, and if we have a value out here in the k spot. Well, what if we have a number out here that's negative in the a value? Well, looking at this here, like other functions, this is going to flip it upside down. Okay, so our first graph here, -1, okay, 2 to the x, well, that's just going to flip it upside down. So instead of, when x is 1, instead of being 2, this will be -2. All right, and I think, and let's go by 1s here. Okay, when x is 1, well, y is going to be -2. I think we just said that. All right. When x is 2, we've got -4. X is 3, we've got -8. And our asymptote now is going to get closer and closer this way. So all that does is it flips it upside down there. Okay. All right. Not very good on the asymptote side there. Let's get a little better. Okay. All right. And so I think we can see that all this does is flip it. So how about this one? This is going to flip it upside down. This is going to move it right 1. Remember, negative is going to move it right 1. Okay? So all these points are going to go right 1 over here. That's going over there. That's going over there. This guy's going over there. Okay? And it's going to be just to the right of that graph. Okay? And one last one here to wrap it up. Let's say we have, let's put it all together, upside down with the -1. This one's going to move left 2, and this one's going to move down 1. So if we take all these green points, which are already flipped upside down, we can move them left 2 and down 1. And so that's going to go something like this, left 2 and down 1. So this point here is going to go left 2, down 1 to here. Okay, right about there. And this guy right here is going to go left 2 and down 1. This point right here is going to go left 2, down 1, left 2, down 1 over here. Okay? And since we moved down 1, this is our asymptote. So our asymptote here is going to be -1. And so let's put our asymptote there. And let's go ahead and graph this. All right, and that gives us a general picture there. So, once again, graphing on a calculator will easily give us this graph, but we should be able to know where the function goes even without using that calculator. So using this general form, A is going to be the starting value, okay, or the x-intercept there, without the k there, the initial value we should say. Okay, B is the base. This is going to move left or right. This is going to move up or down, and that's what we get. So good luck.